50 looks up, he's getting shot, so it's hard to see, and he turned to the guy he was with and said, I think that was Hommo.
What do you remember about the Supreme Team's operation?
Yeah, you know, I always see a lot of numbers. So there's different eras of the Supreme Team. You know, the first Supreme Team case I wasn't around for, and Kenneth McGriff was actually in jail. He took a plea on I think a conspiracy to distribute drugs, and I think he got like an 8-year bid or something like that. And while he was in jail, his nephew, Gerald Miller, was like, you know, he'd order drugs up from Colombians and kill them. You know, beefs on the street, he took to these real violent levels. And so everyone feared the Supreme Team, but they feared the Supreme Team under Gerald Miller, whose street name was Prince. And so just large amounts of, you know, crack sales in the projects, you know, lots of ripping off suppliers, you know, and just, you know, more senseless acts of violence. If you want to sell drugs and make money, the last thing you want to do is have violence associated with your crew, because it's going to bring heat. But again, you know, he was like the other guy, you know, just not smart, crazy, violent, and without McGriff around, he had nobody to tame him and keep him, you know, in check. So.
And how did Prince just like? How did that?
So the feds did a case with the NYPD, and they ended up taking the Supreme Team down. I mean, he had to get somewhere in the life range. You know, he was prosecuted by the feds. You know, and that kind of was the end of the power. You know, the real powerful era of the Supreme Team. When McGriff came out of jail, Supreme, the game changed a little bit. You know, there was more intense pressure from the police. It was more sophisticated tools and prosecutorial kind of tools to get these guys. The drug sentencing guidelines went way up for crack and coke, more so for crack. So for something you would do maybe 8-year, 10-year bid, you could go away to jail for the rest of your life. So people started to be a little bit more careful, and there was money to be made, but not like that initial era. So.
I see. Now, how did at that time? How did you or hip hop intertwine? Did it with the Supreme Team? Did you or were you aware of any artists?
You know, so I ended up getting involved in. I got a call from a chief who asked me to take a look into the Corley gang. James Corley had gotten out of jail, and he was eluding his parole officer and taking them on 90-mile-an-hour chases on the highway, and he asked me to go grab him. So when I went to look for him, all the different detectives that I talked to out in the field told me, hey, you should be looking at this guy Supreme now. He's out of jail, and there's some acts of violence going on. His lieutenant, Black just got killed. There's some different beefs going on, and it has to do with he's hooked up with his Murder Inc. records, and he's bodyguarding, or he's giving protection to this guy, Ja Rule, or this performer, and they shot this other rapper, 50 Cent. So, you know, I mean, I've always been a real big music guy, so I knew a lot about hip-hop. I came from the Bronx. I lived the next neighborhood over from where the Black Spades came from, which turned into the Zulu Nation and all those guys. So I always knew about hip-hop and you know, urban culture, and so I was like, wow, you know, let me check this out. And a detective from the 103rd Precinct gave me a mixtape from 50 Cent, and I thought it was great. You know, it was How to Rob and songs like that. So I was like, you know, this really interests me. So I never did catch Corley, and I went and put all my efforts into seeing what was going on with the Supreme Team, and we put a case together based on, you know, several homicides, drug trafficking, and it took 5 years to do. The IRS got involved and brought in, you know, guys to look at Murder Inc. records, and it was a crazy 5 years of, you know, the press and 50 Cent coming out and getting like the #1 album in the country. I mean, right. You know, and it wasn't like I was in 50's corner, but, you know, he was a victim in the case. He kept his mouth shut. He refused to cooperate. I went after him, I don't know how many times. I tried to get his attorney, Bob Cleaner, to get him to cooperate. He never would.
Really?
He flat out told me he wouldn't cooperate. So I give him a lot of credit. You know, someone shoots me 9 times, I'm going to go hide for a bit. You know, he came right back out, got in the ring, started fighting. So for me, it was like I saw it as a victory in the way that the guy who shot him, who arranged to shoot him, was, you know, was going to jail for the rest of his life. So, you know.
Which was Hommo, right? Or
no. So here's what happened. When 50 Cent pulls into his grandmother's driveway, Kenneth McGriff, a guy named Son from East New York, and a guy named Godby, who's a 5%er and a former member of the Supreme Team, acting in concert, shoot 50 Cent, I believe it was 9 times. 50 looks up, he's getting shot, so it's hard to see, and he turned to the guy he was with and said, I think that was Hommo. Now, Hommo was a guy named Darryl Baum, who's a famous, like, you know, robber from Brooklyn, really tough guy, tough with his hands, not a shooter, not a killer at all. But 50 said, wow, you know, I think that was Hommo. So he had it in his head that Hommo probably took the contract to get him, because he had trouble with the Supreme Team, he had trouble with the Murder Inc. Records guys. So he figured that it was a contract out on him and Hommo took it. Well, when I heard who the shooter was, this kid's son, he didn't have an arrest record. And I thought, well, that's odd. And so I ordered his driver's license photo. I was like, well, this kid don't look anything like Hommo. So I ended up getting some good surveillance photos from a source of mine. I used to have paparazzi guys give me photos, and I'd say, don't concentrate on the rapper, concentrate on all the guys around him, get me good photos. And when I finally identify him, there is a resemblance to Hommo. And I could see why 50 thought that Hommo was shooting him. Because 50 never cooperated, we were able to get corroborating evidence of who the players were, who shot guns, who hid the getaway car, everything. But because 50 wouldn't cooperate, we really didn't have anything to go by. So the case was solved. We never got credit for it. 50 ever wants to talk about it, you know, give him my number.